Hello and welcome. Here I am with my another video on communication. It's communication process. So let us begin with short introduction about communication process. So the communication process is the steps we take in order to successfully communicate. It is a two-way process and it is a dynamic process that begins with the conceptualizing of ideas by the sender, who then transmit the message through a channel to the receiver. In turn, receiver gives feedback in the form of some message or signals within the given time frame. Successful communication depends upon the effective transmission of message. This process affected by the backgrounds, experiences, objectives and aspirations that both the sender and receiver have in common. So this is the short introduction that what communication process is all about. How sender sends message to receiver. So the next slide is communication process. So first of all sender sends message, then after encode the message and sender sends message via channels to the receiver. Receiver decodes that message and then after gives feedback to sender about his message. So this is the short and sweet communication process. Now we will go through one by one steps from sender to feedback. So the first step is sender. Sender, we can say source. Another name of sender is source. So the sender is the most important element of communication process. Sender transmits the information via channel to one or more receivers. During communication, the background, attitude and mood of the sender are very important. A slight lapse on the part of the sender may affect the fortune of a group, community or even of a nation. The sender must be responsible enough while sending a message. So, sources are objects. Sources, which means senders. Senders are object which encodes message, data and transmit the information via channel to one or more receiver. Sender chooses channel by themselves. The source is a living or a non-living thing as well. And then after sender encodes information and select a channel by which to send messages. So this is the information about sender, that how sender works in communication process. Our next step is message. So message is equally important as the sources. Message is the information that the sender wants to send. In actual, it is an idea, sometimes data or a statement issued by the sender. It may be in the form of words, symbols, gestures, etc. Nowadays, it may be electronic signals or icons on over computer. Communication of message may be verbal or non-verbal. Message is the information conveyed by words or signs and symbols. A message is the main content of the communication process. So we can say that message is a heart of communication, because without message there is no communication in between sender and receiver. We'll move to our next step, which is encoding. So encoding, which means to convert information from one system to another system in the form of codes. It helps the sender to give shape to a message, idea or information. Sender begins with the encoding process, wherein he uses certain words or non-verbal methods such as symbols, signs, body gestures, hand gestures, facial expressions, etc. to translate the information into message. So this is the process of encoding, how sender encodes the message. Now the next step is channel. So channel is the medium through which the sender transmits its message or idea. So it is also important factor that without channel there is no communication in between sender and receiver. So the selection of channels depends upon the sender's mood and receiver's expectations. We can send message by using different technologies like telephones, computer, fax, or sometimes through post. Communication channel may include a wire or a telecommunication and computer networking. It may be a physical transmission medium and it has a certain capacity of transmitting information. To communicate data from one location to another location, we require some medium. Medium, which means channels. These channels are two types. The first is cable and the second one is broadcast. So cable uses wire and transmit data through wires and cables, and the another is broadcast. So while broadcast channel includes satellite, radio and infrared radiations. So these are the channels that sender chooses as per he wants. So the next step of communication process is decoding. It is interpreting the meaning of the message. After the proper channels are selected, the message enters the decoding stage of the communication process. The decoding is done by receiver, and decoding is a skill which includes carefully reading and listening a message for a better understanding. In decoding, the decoder interprets the message according to his own mentality and experience. Decoding means interpreting the meaning of message. Okay, so this is the process of decoding in communication process, which means interpreting the meaning of message. We'll move to our next step, which is the final step, is receiver. That receiver decodes the message encoded by the sender. Receiver is the person for who the message is intended or targeted. The receiver decodes the message depends on his knowledge of subject matter, experience, trust and relationship with the sender. Receiver decodes the message encoded by sender. In the communication process, the receiver is the listener, reader or an observer to whom a message is directed. Receiver is also known as an audience or a decoder. Receiver has to be careful while decoding the message and sending the response, because there are high chances of miscommunication. So this is the process, communication process, and receiver is a main part of communication process. After receiving message from sender, now it's time to give feedback. So here is a feedback, that receiver decodes the message and then sender waits for a response. Sometimes the sender does not receive a response. In that case, sender start checking what went wrong. The examination or evaluation of receiver's response is called feedback, and it is a final step of communication process. Feedback is essential to make two-way communication effective. Without feedback, the communication process remains incomplete. Feedback is the only way to gain receiver's response, and depending on the feedback, sender can take further step. So this is the feedback, and it is very important for sender that how sender's message works. Feedback helps in collection of information. measure the effectiveness of communication, improve labor or management relationship. It also helps in measure effectiveness of media as well, helps in taking proper decision and solving problems, and feedback helps in coordination of various departments. So the feedback is over here, and now it's time to take a next step, which is context. Context is defined as the circumstances surrounding a message. Context is simply the environment in which your message is delivered. There are three types of context. The first is physical context, temporal context, and socio-psychological context. So in physical context, there are physical locations, time of a day, the noise level, the weather, etc. are very important. In temporal context, it includes expectations that people have based on past experience. And in socio-psychological context, it is the balance between people's emotional states and their personal relationships with sender and receiver. So communicate change is based on who we are with and what type of events are occurring around us, opinions and our beliefs. So context is all about these things. So here is, I am ending my video, and this is the communication process from sender to receiver and give feedback about the message. And here is a context, three types of context. So thank you very much.